Well, to another edition of Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles. And Influence Today is about different things that influence you and how we can help you navigate through that stuff. I'm Chet Tart, and Terry, welcome. I'm glad
Thank
you're
you,
here.
Chet. Yeah, great
And
to
I
be here.
understand you've been on the road a lot, talking to a lot of Vistage
Yeah,
members.
it's been a busy year. A lot of CEO influence, and being in the front of the room with CEOs, CFOs, entrepreneurs, thought people that are out there trying to even think about if they want to become their own CEO. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And you and I've talked about doing a series like I think we're going to start on today, really trying to specifically target CEOs and leaders of all kinds, but CEOs probably even more so because
Hmm.
even if you're a small business, you are the chief executive officer. You got to make all the decisions. It's even worse. The smaller you are, the harder it is. Because a lot of new CEOs, upstart companies, regardless of their monies that they're generating, you're the CFO, the COO, the CIO. I mean, you're the C-suite yourself until you
You're
can quit.
everything.
So yeah, it's pretty stressful.
You bring up a good point. One of the things to talk about is that when you do an org chart, and some people do not have an org chart
Right.
or call it an accountability chart, you put your name in areas where you're working. And if your name's in too many boxes, that means you need somebody to help you
Yep.
with that. I
Yep.
also think it's one of the hardest jobs in any organization to be the CEO or leader because they're going to look to you for everything.
Yes.
And whatever you allow yourself to do, you have allowed them to do. That becomes your culture. In
Yes.
fact, let's talk about CEOs and what's the most important thing. I do think there are three really important things overall, looking at the top, looking down,
Mm-hmm.
that are important for CEOs. One of them is they have to pay attention to the culture. They have to pay attention to the core values, the business plan.
Right.
They got to know the mission and work. I call that the culture.
Yep.
And they got to find the right people. Number two is people. They got to have the right people supporting them. They have to have the right people who buy into the culture, which means they have to explain it and they have to keep it alive. And the third one is to know your numbers. It's really important because I don't think you can get a mission together without knowing your numbers.
Right.
Today, I like to focus a little bit on the people because as I travel around and talk to a lot of companies, that seems to be the biggest issue. I can't find people. I can't find the right people. I'm waiting until the last minute to hire somebody who's the wrong fit. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about that a little bit. I believe that there's three parts to it. One is that the interview process has to be transparent and the questions have to be pretty strong to get to know
Right.
people because people can play games. I
Oh yeah.
also suggest that people do diagnostic surveys on the people so they know what kind of person they're getting and put them in the right seats. They have to explain the company so they're aligned. They have to develop them and coach them. The line I hear all the time is, well, they're adults and I don't want to babysit them. Well, you do.
Yes.
And the last one, you have to get them engaged. So let's talk about the people and the team. And we
Mm-hmm.
can also look at it more than just business, because I think with your background about the team for racing and the team for football, give me some examples of what you think makes a great team and what you've seen work.
It really starts with the CEO of the team. And in my opinion, it's not the general manager or the owner. It's the head coach. And that's why you hire head coaches, because if something goes wrong, you get rid of them. You're not going to get rid of your quarterback or your best driver. The coach is always the first one to take the hit. But
Hmm.
that person's the one that's charting out what you just said: culture, mission, vision, strategy, implementation. I mean, the GM is running the business. So you've got the CEO of the team, which is fiduciary, but the coach at that point is not really involved in that high level of decision making. Their job is to get it done on the field or on the racetrack. So when I think about a good coach to a great coach, like Jim Collins wrote years ago, Good to Great, I think what differentiates a good coach from a great coach are some very simple attributes that that coach, he or she, tries to embed into the team players. And there's some really no
Mhm.
BS kind of things because at that level, at the pro level, people can smell BS from a long ways away. They've already been through the high school, the college, or in the pro ranks. They've seen a lot of coaches, a lot of assistant coaches. They've been through the ranks. So I love the word team because I think the first thing a coach has to do is he has to build trust. They have to trust that he or she is potentially a player coach. Whether they played, that's even better. If they didn't, they know what they're doing. Bill Belichick, as an example. I mean, he wasn't a player coach necessarily, but he built trust in people and he did it the old school way. So trust is a part of team, the T. Enthusiasm. You don't want to work for somebody that's like drab and, they walk in the door in the building and they suck all the oxygen out of the room. Their job is to breathe oxygen in the room. So enthusiasm is a part of the E on team. And I think the A, just be authentic. Be you. Don't try to be Bill Belichick or Roger Penske in racing. Be who you are, but be real because people can see if you're not real because it shows day after day after day, and there'll be a crack in your armor. They'll see if you're not being real. And the last one is the M of team, and it's motivation. A job of a great coach or a leader, CEO, is to build trust, enthusiasm in your team, authenticity in front of your team and with your team, and to motivate them, which I'd rather say inspiration. So motivation, inspiration go together, but it's to build that acronym together. And I think great leaders and coaches, CEOs kind of fall around this aspect as I train with them, and it tends to work.
Can I clear a couple things up for you? Because I've worked with some great leaders here. Trust is a big thing, but I think it goes back to being vulnerable and saying,
Yes.
I'm sorry, or I got a problem, and things like
Yes.
that. And also, there's behaviors that take place with trust. For instance, do what you say you're going to do, show up on time so everyone else does that. So I think that's important. You talked about motivation. I like the word inspiration because I think you can
Yes.
inspire people. I don't know how you motivate people. I mean, I'm struggling with that myself, but I can inspire people by giving them a vision and giving them the mission of how to get there and always say, "Hey, here's how we get an A at the end of the day," because we like that stuff. We get that going
Yep.
also. But I have met some great leaders who, let me say the word, passionate or know where
Mhm.
they're going, but they're not the most enthusiastic. But I would imagine the way they communicate is
Correct.
passionate about it. So
That's
let's
correct.
not mistake maybe behavioral stuff for the
Correct.
words. I mean, it's like an interpretation of what we're saying here. I think that's powerful, very powerful stuff. Let's talk about the team. The most, when I find that people put the wrong team together, you go up the stream, and the stream starts with hiring.
Yes.
And first of all, most people who are coaches are not trained to be coaches. And they just be coached because hey, I got it. I like this job. I built it myself. I'm hiring people. So I do think they need a coach to teach them how to be a coach, number one. And number two, I think the biggest thing I see is up the stream is they have no hiring processes of what they need to do, what they need to, questions they ask, and if they answer the question, what they do. How do you know you got a good player or not? What have you seen out there with the hiring situation? Let's start with that.
I think one of the things that I see, and I agree with you on the passion, the enthusiasm, the inspiration. I mean, these are all words that all of us use. But when you build a team, it's about people.
Yeah.
So you've got to hire the right people. And I think part of that comes down to the confusion of what kind of person fills that spot on the bus. And I like the straw person approach. Like you build this position CEO, CFO, CIO, COO, whatever your C-suite person is you're looking for as an example, and you build that person on paper. I need someone who's smart, who's or articulate, who's good at whatever, 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 whatever. And then that gives you a framework to go find that person that fits that mold. So if in a football analogy, as an example, if I'm looking for a quarterback, I'm probably not looking to say, hey, I got a great deal on a lineman and I
Hmm.
can get him at a good price and we'll make him a quarterback. Probably not going to happen. You got to figure out what your position players are and then go find out who fits those positions and then work there. I think that's a great starting place. I think a lot of companies fall short in. They look for where'd you go to school, what's your previous examples of how you led. Listen, that's all important too, but maybe not for your company. You might need a very specific person. In most cases, we all do to fill that role. Find out what that role is by a straw person example, and then go find them.
I also think that they need to tell a story. When you talk about trust, let's start with that. Um, Tell me
Mhm.
a story about when your trust was challenged. How did you deal with it? What went through your mind? If your boss said this and it was really not the right thing to do, what would you do? Things like that. I think the building of the questions are good. There was a couple of years ago that I actually took a course from Zappos, and their situation of hiring people is just tremendous. The kind of questions, what the answers meant, and how important it was during that conversation. And they played a lot of mind games on you to make sure that
Sure.
you wanted to be part of that. The thing that blew me out of the water that they wanted to make sure that you wanted to be part of that company, and they would give you $2,000 not to join the company. If you took the $2,000, you knew you didn't want to be part of this company. You were just
Right.
taking a job. But if you wanted the job, you didn't take the $2,000.
Correct.
So I look at that. The other thing I'm thinking about is that behind you, you have this book called Invaluable. And
Yes.
when you're being hired, that's got to be in your mind, what kind of value you're adding to them. But when I was hiring people, I used a different term, which it means the same thing. I said, how do you create a vacuum between you and the average person so that you stand out?
Yes.
Tell me a story about that. That's what the questions are. Tell me a little bit about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difference that I look for in that scenario is understanding the difference between insulation and isolation. I find many times leaders isolate themselves from their team members. They sit in their office, they sit in their silos, they send out emails, they, appropriate what needs to be done, and they trust their people. Trust, again, true you. They trust that their people are going to do that versus insulating themselves and going amongst the team members and finding out what they really think. I love great leaders that I've been around. I've been around some interesting people as you have as leaders, and they're people. They want
Mhm.
to know what you think. And you could be the janitor, you could be the accountant, you could be the pilot of the Air Force team. They want to know who the people are. And I think that's a very misunderstood concept that just because you're in a place of leadership doesn't mean that you don't associate with your people. You have to be authentic. And that's why I love the word authenticity. Be real, be you. If it's not natural, learn how to do it. Walk the aisles, go meet your people, go find out. Great leaders have camaraderie with their team members, and that's what starts building that trust process.
Mhm. I have three non-negotiables I talk to leaders about, and it really has to do with people. I
Hmm.
do work with people who can't understand why their people are not following them and why they don't like them is because they send out memos and never walk the hallways and talking to them.
Yes.
One of them is crystal clear communications. It means different things to different people. I always say that if you're talking to somebody, you're not sure what they're hearing, and that's important to
Right.
know what they're hearing. The
Correct.
second one is the one-on-ones. I think they're critically important, but it's about the employee, not about how are we doing on this job, what's been done. It's really about them. That's what the one-on-ones should be. It's about them and what support can I give you? What am I missing? How's the team members doing? What do you see that I'm missing? Questions like that. But you can't ask the same questions over and over again because the one-on-ones get boring. So you have to be pretty good at that.
I
The other
think
one,
it's like a marriage or a parenting situation. I mean, if,
mhm.
if if love really covers everything and protects, love protects, doesn't think evil, doesn't think that you're necessarily trying to sabotage. It tries to think the best versus the worst. In a parenting situation with my son or with your children or your grandchildren, whatever the case might be, my job is not to just feel like I need to be first. My job is to make sure they're good, you know? In a marriage, my first job is make sure my spouse or significant other is good. Am I good? Maybe. But I got that becomes selfless. And I think leadership has a selflessness about it that I think if you do it correctly, you really think about your performers more than you think about yourself to get the bigger picture accomplished and painted and framed and sold. And
Hmm.
then you can go back and refurbish yourself. And to your point earlier, that's why coaching is so important. Some of the greatest performers in the world that we know, athletes in the world, all of them at a high level, all have coaches because you
They
can't
do.
see
They
blind
do.
spots. Yeah.
Hmm. They do. I think it's important that everyone has coaches
Yes.
because we all have blind spots
Yep.
to go through. So the second one basically is one-on-ones, and sometimes I hear, well, they don't want to do one-on-ones, and I said that's actually feedback to you. The reason they don't want one-on-ones is because you're doing it wrong or they're boring, and you don't really understand them or care about them. It's very important that you have these one-on-ones. And I'm
Yes.
also finding out ones that do it great. The employees like the one-on-ones. And they also have morning huddles, and the huddles are about how we doing today, what job has to get done, what
Correct.
obstacles are out there. And the last one of my non-negotiables is how do we give feedback? How is that delivered? How often is that delivered? And I'm not talking about negative all the time. I'm talking about great feedback. And I'm also
Sure.
talking about if something goes wrong, how do we debrief it so that we look at it in a positive way of how do we correct this situation. I'm not sure that every driver is like that, and drivers are what CEOs are really like. They
Right.
just move too fast. And I go, you got to slow down time because you have
Mhm.
people, and people are what make your process work.
Yes. And I think about if you get called into your CEO's office, or if the CEO is called into the board of directors meeting that he or she is not normally a part of, I'm either one or two things. I'm either excited or I'm afraid. I'm excited because I know my numbers. I know what I've done and I can back them, right? Or I'm afraid because A, I don't know the numbers, or the numbers aren't where they're supposed to be. So I'm either going to get some praise or possibly get fired.
Hmm.
So to get called into a higher level for feedback should be a good thing if the leader is doing their job correctly and showing accountability around measurable numbers and responses. If not, you deserve to be fearful because they're probably going to put you out and bring somebody else in who can get it done.
I want to end with two things that are important is that you're creating an environment. As a CEO, the
Mm,
environment is more powerful than the person.
yes.
So the culture, the process is everything that's incredibly important because if you notice that environment can definitely take over willpower.
Yes.
That's a really important thing. And the other thing is to take care of your people and to understand them. And some of the questions I ask is that I'm not sure what I said until you tell me what you heard because
Mhm.
they hear it differently. And it's important to get that feedback. And debriefing might be a softer word than feedback. And it's also about correcting the behavior. When
Yeah.
you look at the culture and the core values, say, is this part of our core values?
Well, and you got to know when to bring somebody on that needs to fill a seat, and it sounds harsh, but you really need to know when to let them go. And that sounds really harsh, but I think great leaders know when to hire and when to fire. And if you can't do that, I'm not sure you're really looking at the aerial view of the overall mission as the leader. I mean,
Hmm.
no one likes to fire people. I've been in situations with companies that I've been a part of firings a lot, and it's not fun. But it's purging, it's necessary. And if somebody's not doing the job and you're not correcting that behavior, to your point earlier, what do you think is going to change on the bottom line in the next quarter or the
Hmm.
next year? You're going to end up in the same place. So you have to know how to hire. You have to be willing to fire. It's like it's a corporate prenup. You have to know that if something goes wrong, here's our out. I don't want it to go wrong. They don't want it to go wrong because it's like a love fest when you hire on. Oh my God, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be, it all starts like that. but things happen when you're making other plans. So I think great leaders need to understand how to hire, how to potentially fire if necessary. But the middle of that is what we're talking about. How do you coach them to the point that you don't have to fire them? And as long as they're willing students to learn, you can keep them on and grow them and teach them to be a team player with the entire organization.
So I hope that's been helpful, and I hope that's a good insight. Sometimes we hear the message over and over again, and once in a while it resonates with us. Is that, hey, maybe I mean, I talk to a lot of CEOs, and sometimes none of this stuff resonates. And then one day they do it, and I get a phone call. Hey, Chet, that worked.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that happens
Yes.
once in a while. Any final statements before we go on this topic?
Yeah, no, I think it's been great. And I think about this with my younger son, and he'll come home from school and say, "Hey, Dad, I heard this, I learned this today, and Bobby told me this," and I'm like, man, I'd say that every day. Sometimes you can't hear people that are close to you. You need a coach, you need somebody else to affirm what you've been saying over and over and over again. Then one day there's this epiphany like, oh my God, I figured this out. And you're like, we've been doing this forever. Hey, it's okay. I give props to Bobbies that are
Mhm.
out there. You know what I mean? Because they're just affirming what I've said or what mom has said or what the teacher has said or the principal has said. So I think leadership is about willing to be open, that we don't know everything about everything. It takes a village to raise, and it takes a board and a team of people to succeed.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate
Yeah,
that.
you're welcome.
Hey, if you've liked today's show, Influence Today, please hit the like button and share with somebody. If you think that it hit a nerve or you picked out something, please let us know. We'd appreciate that. You
Sure.
can contact Terry. Terry is a Vistage speaker.
Mhm.
You go all over the country speaking in different Vistage groups.
Correct.
How do they get in touch with you?
Just terrylyles.com, TerryLyles.com, or you can email me at tlc@terrylyles.com. So I'm pretty easy to find.
Right. I'm Chet Tart. I'm on LinkedIn. And also, if you go to
Mhm.
vistageflorida.com, you can find me there. And my email address is simple, ctart@vistageflorida.com. So thank you for listening to Influence Today, and we'll catch you on our next episode of Influence Today.